Good afternoon, everyone. To those who are here, to those who are listening or watching by whatever medium, welcome to another Government of Anguilla press conference. If it's Monday and it's not a holiday, at 2 p.m. we'll be here to bring you the information. And we thank you for coming. Before we go on, I'll ask Minister Kenneth Hart to lead us in a word of prayer.
Thank you, Premier. Dear Lord, we come before you this afternoon seeking your intervention in this island, seeking your covering hands over this island. We ask that you protect all those who may be afflicted at this time. We ask that you continue to protect all those who are charged with the responsibility of keeping this island safe, our health workers, our nurses, our police officers, customs, immigration, taxi drivers, hospitality workers, all persons that are part of that cohort of persons who interact with our visitors and others coming to this island. We ask especially for your healing hands upon the island of Haiti today as they recover from the ravages of those earthquakes, and we ask that you provide the comfort and guidance as they begin to rebuild that country. We ask these blessings in your name. Amen.
Given the recommendations of the health team, we ask that since we're in a closed space and that we wear our masks, except we do, if you're speaking, you're allowed to remove your mask while speaking. Thank you for that. So what I'll do right now is turn over to the health team so that they can bring us up to date with it and where things are. There was a recent press release that went out today, and so what I'll do is ask the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Foster Rogers, and the Chief Medical Officer to bring us update with the COVID status, the vaccination status, any other protocols that we need to get some clarification on, and then we'll move on from there. You can ask questions after. Thank you very much.
So you would note that we had a very busy last 4 days since the last press brief, but we at the ministry feel that actually given the circumstances, there's a lot to celebrate. We just have to be strategic going forward, and we hope that as with previously, the community will have our full cooperation and trust and confidence. Okay, so of course we had a last press release on Thursday, August 12th. Since then, between Friday and this morning, Friday and yesterday actually, we confirmed an additional 10 cases of COVID. And we gave the breakdown, including one small cluster, and I'll go on to explain. As we said in the press release, they consisted of a fully vaccinated adult female from Canada. She was traveling with a returning resident. Both of them were dwelling in an Anguillan household. They arrived on the 2nd of August, and they, of course, had their negative tests on arrival, pre-arrival, and so on. She was tested on August 13th for onward travel, and this is where she tested positive. Of course, she's isolated with mild symptoms. I'll say generally there have been no hospitalizations. We are seeing a lot of asymptomatic cases on very mild symptoms. I'll just say the mild symptoms have been ranging from a runny nose, nasal congestion, at the worst, cough that does not even require hospitalization. Okay, so of course you note that the 4 remaining household members were tested and so far have tested negative. As per our protocols, they have to remain under quarantine until they test out. Then of course we detected a small cluster. The first person interacted with the health system. You would note that up to Thursday, we had said in our press release, we had at least 2 incidences where we were trying to investigate the source. It was not obvious at the time. And so in the guidance, we said if you are having symptoms compatible or you think you have been exposed, please come in and get tested. She went to a private physician, and of course, he alerted us when the test came back positive. From that contact investigation that ensued, thus far we identified another 5 persons. In this instance, we noted that the index case was actually of an adult fully vaccinated male resident who came back from St. Martin on August 2nd. So he is considered the index case, and on follow-up testing, actually he's already almost cleared. He's negative on one gene and almost negative on the other gene. While we confirmed the source of infection in terms of the way the values went and his clearance, it's a pretty clear pattern that he got the infection first, followed by a gentleman in the business establishment of the lady, and so on and so forth. So that's how that went. Interesting enough for you to note, there were at least 2 exposures in a closed setting with poor ventilation. So again, that speaks to the science that we know in terms of the transmission risk in that setting. So all of them are currently under isolation, and we continue the contact tracing. So we may get a few more from that. We won't know until we complete the contact tracing. And then we had a fully vaccinated adult female visitor from the US who arrived in Anguilla on August 11th. The usual spiel that she submitted negative test, tested negative on arrival, and again we found that on her departure test she was positive, very mild symptoms as well, and remains isolated. And then we had a fully vaccinated male resident yesterday morning with no recent history of travel who tested positive yesterday morning due to symptoms. So of course he came in as was directed. So we're still investigating the source of that infection. And you would note that that's the 3rd such incident in about 10 days where we have no known source. That said, the contact investigation and source investigation are ongoing, and we'll see where that leads. And then finally last night, by the time we got the information from the lab, we had a fully vaccinated adult male who came in the evening on one of the latest boats to Anguilla from St. Martin, and he tested positive upon arrival, also asymptomatic, and remains isolated in his asymptomatic state. Since the last release, we have an additional 6 persons who have recovered. Like I told you, busy last few days, testing and assessing and so on, these persons as well. So with that brought the total number of cases confirmed since the pandemic began, not since the weekend, because we were hearing some figures out there that were, very inflated, to say the least. Since the pandemic began, we've had 137 cases, of which 13 are considered active at this time. Additionally, just in the last few days, we have screened more than 174 persons in relation to this contact tracing and investigation for these recent cases as of August 8th, right? So one of the things, and maybe I'll stop here, let me just interject here about our vaccination status. Our last report is that we're somewhere around 60%, 58% fully vaccinated of the population. And in terms of persons who have received at least a first dose, I think that's around 70%, 71%. Let me look at that. Add that up just now. And then I will take the time now to address some of the concerns that have arisen. Actually, where we are seeing a lot of reasons to celebrate, I know persons were very concerned what the ministry would advise. Persons were very wary of another shutdown, and we are happy to say that that's nowhere in our thoughts right now. We don't see the necessity. And if you remember our last experience with our cluster, what we had said in that time, and that would really drove the need for vaccination, we said, if we get our population sufficiently vaccinated, we put that eventuality or that need for a shutdown further and further behind. Thus far, that has been playing out. We have seen a drastic difference. Just to share, we believe that the Delta virus is circulating elsewhere, everywhere, is causing this kind of explosion of cases in the US, which is our most common market, and everywhere else, right? So Delta is really, really ravaging countries where they made gains before. It has changed the ball game. The good news is that it has still, in terms of efficacy, the vaccines are still doing what they were supposed to do. In the first instance, the most important thing was to prevent hospitalizations, to prevent severe disease, and prevent deaths. That is still happening overwhelmingly. We're seeing it, we're living it, and we're not the only country. This has become somewhat of the norm. Every call we have with the UCOTS and other entities and so on, everybody is getting these cases in fully vaccinated persons. And we have to be reminded that really the objective was, we knew that the vaccines would not 100% prevent infection. We wanted them to 100% prevent severe disease and death, and we're still seeing that. Has Delta changed the game a bit? Yes, because it's one of the most contagious. It causes more severe disease. There's something called the basic reproductive number in terms of infectiousness. We went from with the original virus of one person infecting 3 to 4 susceptible persons, non-immune persons. Then we had the Alpha variant that went up to about 5 to 6 persons. Now Delta, you're infecting 8 to 9 persons, 7 to 9 persons. So it's very infectious, right? So yes, and at the time when the vaccines came out and the first data came out, we had also seen up to data, up to Alpha, real evidence of reduced transmission in the most risky of settings, which were the household contacts. We were seeing a 50% reduction. And then we started to hear the talk about herd immunity and the promise of herd immunity. The caveat and the warning and the sense of urgency about vaccination, which has not changed, was that if we do not vaccinate fast enough, what's going to happen? The virus would mutate and you don't know what you're going to get. Unfortunately, with Delta, that has played out because it's a bit more worrisome, a bit more challenging to deal with than the original strains of the virus, than the most recent variants of concern even. So like I said, some epidemiologists describe it as coronavirus on steroids, right? Again, we cannot reinforce the message enough. The global community has to get its act together as relates to vaccination, because if we continue to have transmission, we are going to get something else in the future. We don't know what that's going to be. Quite frankly, there's a distinct possibility and a distinct threat and risk that something else is on the horizon that will be worse, right? So that message certainly has not changed. Further to that, I saw questions online about, oh, how come only vaccinated persons are getting it? Because, fortunately for Anguilla, as we speak, most of our population, adult population, is actually vaccinated. They're seeing the same phenomenon in Iceland, which has an even higher vaccination rates. And as I said before, Iceland was showing how effective the vaccines are. Nobody was dying, nobody was getting very sick. But make no doubt, this pandemic is being fueled at this time by unvaccinated persons. They get more severe disease, they're certainly infectious longer, and that is where we're seeing the spread. To date, you have over 90% of American counties covered in the red, where a month ago everything had dropped. Now they have extremely high transmission rates, and CDC has had to adjust its guidelines. US is saying, everybody is saying that has a differential between vaccinated and unvaccinated. You are seeing a stark difference in the prevalence of infection. It's still much higher among the unvaccinated. They're more than 3 times more likely to get the virus, and of course they stay infectious much longer. And of course the worst outcome, they are getting very ill and dying. So again, with reference to our own local experience, we saw what happened in a cluster. We had to shut down fast just because of the information. That was not even the Delta variant. That was Iota. That was a variant of interest, not even a variant of concern. We had 3 persons hospitalized. One, I mean, you could say close to dying. I was bracing myself for maybe the first COVID death, quite frankly. And that was not even something as virulent, as serious as the Delta strain, right? We saw the surge of cases in short time. By the time we said 3 and people were laughing from other countries, why we shut down, we had 20 odd the next day, and we saw that consistent surge for the first week. And we said to the public, work with us. At that time, we had such low vaccination rates as well. This was being fueled mostly among unvaccinated persons as well. But beyond that, most people had not been fully vaccinated. I'm hard-pressed to remember one, because this was in April, and we just started our vaccination campaign in February. We have a 3-month interval. We have seen that play out, right? So we know this is true. So that has not changed. And hopefully this is what we are seeing in Anguilla already. If we get to the point where this illness, these are the worst symptoms we can expect, there's no reason to stop livelihood. There's no reason to introduce undue restrictions and impediments to people's daily lives. The society has worked with us. We do not want to go into another lockdown. That's hard for everybody. We do not want to impact livelihood. We're just coming out of that. We don't want to go there again. We're looking at the information. We are monitoring the situation, and we strongly believe it's not warranted. That said, we are about mitigating risk. At this point in time, again, because of Delta, we're really talking much more about risk mitigation and risk elimination. So I will just try to address another thing that has come up. We have thus reintroduced the quarantine for returning residents, and I know that has caused a stir. But we want to share with you the sentiment or the spirit of those regulations. What we have observed, and we have tangible evidence in our risk assessment, the returning residents have inadvertently become a hole, a chink in the armor, because of the attempts to relax measures. We tried with arrival testing, and then you go free and blah, blah, blah. What we have seen consistently, that in stark contrast to the visitors are still being managed very differently than the residents. Persons in the hospitality industry are overwhelmingly keeping the so-called bubble approach and bubble protocols. We have had still a majority of imported cases in our last cases. I'm hard-pressed to remember even one local resident in the hospitality industry, for example, that has emerged as a viable, for real contact. It's not happening. From the ferry operators to the concierge, everybody, waiters, everybody, housekeeping, people are towing the line. People who are trained, people know the risks, and people are sticking with it. However, when you're a returning resident, you're inserted into the community. We're in homes, we're in households. The resident, the young lady that returned with a returning resident is an example. That visitor's behavior with a returning resident is very different from if she were staying at one of the resorts. We have to own that. There's another reason as well, and we have to be on the same team. Tourism is our bread and butter. We cannot deny it. We had, I think, a more successful season than anyone imagined, especially given the circumstances, including the cluster, the times. Everyone is trying to avoid this economic recession. There was no reason to leave the industry. I mean, the period is almost over, right? We're going into the slow season. On that note, that hinted of some kind of change to come that would impact adversely the industry. We already said with that arrival test, you stay in place and then you don't quarantine. It was not an opportune time. There's no reason for it. We have done our assessment. We saw where the risk was really coming from, and we really wanted to look at that as soon as possible in terms of plugging that hole, right? Secondly, that an inadvertent phenomenon that comes with the returning residents, with the fairly recent introduction of the departure testing in the US and other places that wasn't there before, we are actually getting another look. We are getting a second test. Hence the reason we found some on departure testing and whatnot. Remember a few months ago, they weren't requiring it. And it was like some would refuse. We tried to get that from a surveillance perspective, and then we had no grounds to test them again. But we are testing them again. So we have a full understanding of their status before they leave. That is powerful, right, in terms of the contact tracing. The activities they engage in when they're here are generally very different. They're doing restauranting, they're dining, they're on the beach and so on. Those are, because of the way Anguilla is, those are low risk settings, and it's playing out. We're seeing it, we're seeing it very convincingly. So that's the thing. And another aspect as well, looking at what we try to address this risk category, which is the returning residents. You've seen what just happened with these persons. Even in the cases that we are not sure where the sources as yet, you get the sense, you know where that hole was. We know. We have a good idea. If we were seeing that with the visitors, invariably you can concede that some of the returning residents would have been positive and missed, or infected and missed. It stands to reason. Now we've seen that play out with the recent cluster, unfortunately. That is exactly what happened, right? So we've seen that evidence. And lastly, before I take a break, because I know I'm speaking on relations focal point, Public Health England, they're saying, okay, can you provide information on the Delta variant that was case that was discovered in Anguilla? And I said to the PS, no, there's a huge mistake. We haven't seen Delta, right? So we went through a long trail of emails back and forth and so on. We contacted CARFA, and they said, where is this error occurring? Because CARFA coordinates our testing and sequencing with the University of the West Indies. And I was able to show, with all the results we had, there was no Delta, right, to our knowledge, so no problem. However, it was brought to our attention, and in February, there was a case, an imported case, a gentleman visitor from the US, right? At the time, they had done the sequencing, they had designated the lineage B1, and it didn't go beyond that. Subsequent to that, in the ensuing months, the University of the West Indies upgraded its software, and they were able to do more sequencing. And I'm sure not just on that sample, but on the samples around the Caribbean, because they do samples for the Caribbean. So, and Delta was found, right? But the interesting thing is why I want to address the public, because I'm seeing online that we are allegations that we are blaming residents and whatnot. What we're saying is we have an obvious gap in our armor. It's not a blame. It's about mitigating risk. It has become very obvious in terms of the risk, right? This last situation with the cluster underlies that was a returning resident, and now we have a cluster of 6 that was not tested. We only caught him because of the cluster investigation, and we end up going back to him. We would not have seen that, right? Interesting enough, you know what happened with that Delta case back in February? Absolutely nothing. That was February. We didn't even know. You do see what's happening with the Delta variant in the other countries. And why is that? Because we had protocols, we had bubble and stuff like that speak to a model of quarantine that speak to risk mitigation. We have evidence that that works, right? We faced Delta before we even knew what it was. And what we've kept saying for the last 18 months, the measures, the public health measures work irrespective of what variant you're dealing with. What Delta has done is that we have had to put back certain things in place until better can be done. Now, if we're seeing this glaring area of risk, what should we do? Another thing that pushed us in that direction, this virus historically has spared young children, right? And the healthy and young adults. Delta has caused an astronomical increase in hospitalizations in children and young adults. Again, when we are returning residents, we're in our households, we're in the churches, we're in the settings that will, mass gatherings. We interact differently when we live here than tourists overwhelmingly. And that's true. We are facing an existential threat and a crisis, and we are at war. We have to be smart. We are at war with the virus, I'm telling you, and we are at war with the rest of the world that's trying to get back their economies on board, right? We have no reason right now to implement that in the tourism sector. That is our bread and butter. If that changes, God forbid, we will have to look at those things as well. If there's another variant that comes along that takes us further back, we can only roll with the punches, and Delta has been giving out the punches and then some. So far, in my humble estimation, we are still rolling with the punches. It would have been great if we maintain 100% reduction in the household. Delta has changed that. What it has not changed so far is the original objective of all these vaccines, which is to prevent severe disease and death. If we keep it like this, if we keep our numbers manageable, there's no reason for us to do a shutdown to curtail activities and so on. Hopefully by the time the tourism opens again, we have this again back to where we were before and stuff like that. So we need to look at that. That said, you will see that in our latest press release, we didn't change much at all in our guidance over the previous release because we feel like we're pretty much in the similar basket and a similar state. Further to our guidance and reinforcing public health measures and whatnot, what we did as well is to preemptively and out of an abundance of caution, we have looked at the vulnerable sectors in our community. Fortunately, again for Anguilla, school is out. This is a litmus test. We have 2 to 6 weeks to see where this goes, cautiously. School is out. That's a big chunk of our vulnerable population. We have also suspended visits to the prison for the next couple of weeks and also to the elder care homes. Kudos to the prison staff because 94.5% of prison staff are vaccinated. 53 out of 55. Thank God, you know what I mean? Compared to, I think, 9 out of 36 prisoners. They are a vulnerable group, but at least we have done our part in terms of our civil duty, in terms of the prison staff. So that is very good news. Somebody asked a question also about false positives in these asymptomatic cases. No, this means that the vaccine is working. Our machine really doesn't lie, and those CT values and so on, and even the follow-up testing, these are cases. But they're not reaching the hospital, and they're not being hospitalized, and they're not dying, and this is Delta. We held our breath because you do not want to expect with this variant, because you're supposed to see, if this comes to a vulnerable population, an explosion of sick people. So we play our game right, we look back, and we have to reassess, and every time we're met with a challenge, we cannot say the same thing every time when the information has changed, when the epidemiology has changed, we have to work with it. Right now, it's still good. Right now, it's still pretty good. Think of where we were last time with a cluster. So let's try to see where this will go and keep the faith.
Thank you very much, Chief Medical Officer, and thank you for your hard work and entire team over the last week. We have been at this now since January of 2020, the Ministry of Health and the team, and with our counterparts around the world. And I think we have indicated in more than one time in Anguilla that we try to give the best advice possible. We look at what's happening on the ground, we looked at what's happening overseas, and we try to give the best advice and best recommendation possible. And I think over the last year and a half, I think the public of Anguilla can definitely say that we have tried our best to manage this in a way that all Anguillans could be proud of, in a way that we can continue the gains we've made over the last years of Anguilla, in a way that we can move forward. Now, with regard to epidemiology, one of my colleagues used to tell me, figures don't lie because they can't talk. So the figures are the figures. And what we've reported today are the figures. If you recall, when we had a cluster back in April, after the second day we had like 30-something cases. We were getting like 15, 20 cases a day. We have now been 8 days into this, and all we have seen so far basically is these 13 cases. And we can say certainly after 8 days last time, we were hitting like 50-something, 60-something, 70 cases. But you recognize then, back in April, we only had about less than 7,000 people with their first doses and less than 3,000 people with their second doses. Now, we have close to 10,000 people with first doses and almost 9,000 people with second doses. So it is a different kettle of fish, so to speak. It is a whole different community. In fact, in epidemiology, we look at what we call the triad, the vector, which is the agent, in this case, the virus. We look at the environment, and which is, of course, what we live in, and the host, which is human. And it's just three things that interplay to cause the disease: the environment, the agent, and the host. And so we are seeing these interplays all the time, and we are looking at ways to mitigate the risk of transmitting. And right now, as Dr. Aisha has indicated quite correctly, that we feel this is a softer way, knowing the conditions that exist on the ground. Now, so far, since we began testing, we've tested almost 38,000 tests, 37,111 tests since we started testing last year. The bulk of those tests are in the tourism industry. Persons coming in, persons staying in the tourism industry, and persons getting tests to leave, to go back. So the persons in the tourism industry are the greatest tested persons in Angola. So we know what's happening in the tourism industry. And even if we get a positive when persons are leaving, we know the contact tracing where they are, and we still can't find a case where a positive visitor entering Angola has spread that disease to the Angolans. We can't. Right? So out of those 37,111 cases, tests, that we've conducted over the last year, the bulk of those have been in the tourism sector, because they are the most tested sector in Angola. Even if persons come in for 5 days, they test before they come, they test on their arrival, and they test again before the 5th day so they can get a test to go back out. And in many instances, we would test them even when we're in the middle of the cluster. So we have the information. I go back to say, again, figures don't lie because they can't speak. We have the raw data. We know what the figures look like. So that's why the recommendation we made to the Executive Council were in keeping with what we were seeing on the ground. Second, I'll tell you again in public health. What we are taught in public health is that health economics and health benefits in countries go hand in hand. The economics of a country are critical to proper health. And you've always heard me say this. I've said this over and over and over. You cannot have a healthy population if you don't have a healthy economy. It's impossible. We have to buy medications, we have to pay doctors, we have to pay nurses. Persons have to be able to buy proper foods to eat, to stay healthy. And it's a cycle. So when we make recommendations in terms of what we think is critical now, regarding the gaps we've had, we had to make a recommendation that allows some economic activity to continue, knowing that we have the high vaccination rates, and we always spoke to the fact that that's what we want to get. We cannot shut down every time we have a little spike here and there. It's just not possible. I can tell you, the Minister of Finance can tell you, the losses to the government of Angola in April when we shut down for that month was phenomenal. And up to now, government has not really gotten back to a point where it can recover those revenues. Up to now, government has not caught itself. But it was necessary to shut down then because what we saw coming, had we not shut down, and we didn't make that recommendation lightly. We went to council and made that recommendation based on the fact of what we were seeing. This time is a different kettle of fish altogether. We were not seeing those mountain cases. We were not seeing the possible contacts that were all over the place. We were not seeing that. That is why we recommended to council a different approach. So we said to council on, was it last week, Wednesday or Thursday? I think what we should do is simply at this point in time, protect those groups at risk. Hospital visitations, prison visitations, visitations to institutions, and elderly homes. Other than that, we felt it was, at this point in time, something that we can manage without shutting down the entire country, because if you don't have to do that, why do you do it? It causes harm, it causes people not to be able to work, it causes people to lose salaries. So we make recommendations based in a very responsible way, based on what we're seeing on the ground. This virus is going to be with us for a while. We have many variants now. Apart from a Delta variant, there's a Lambda variant that's now coming out of Peru. It's already in the States. There's a Gamma variant that was picked up in Tokyo recently, out of Brazil and Amazon. It's not going to stop. And if you find most of these variants are coming from countries that have uncontrolled pandemic. Most of them, in fact, all of them, because the virus is spreading so quickly, it can mutate. It has no chance to stop, right? So this is going to be with us for a while. In particular, if you see what's happening in the United States right now, it's basically a pandemic amongst the unvaccinated, right? Where do most of our visitors come from? The US. So we have to ensure that we have a responsible way of ensuring that we manage it properly, but it will be with us for a while. And we just have to find a way to get it done in a way that's responsible while keeping the economy going. Make no bones about it. The government of Angola cannot print money. We cannot go to our central bank and say, do some what they call quantitative easing. We cannot go to Congress and increase our debt limit. At this point in time, we can't barely borrow a dime. How do we manage? By ensuring we have a responsible response to this epidemic.
Just a couple other points I forgot to mention, right? Because one of the concerns, they spoke of the carnival activities and unknown source. We can say unequivocally that those first couple instances, they were not in any of those activities, so those were not the sources. These are not people that attended eyes wide shut and whatnot, so that's not the case. Then a second observation, just to share, in terms of mitigating risk, because one might say, I've heard, oh, if it's so mild, let's just bring it on. No, because we have seen the Iceland experience where if you have enough cases, the US will blacklist you. That's our market, or red list you, or whatever. And the fact is that they have had a lot of cases, and that makes sense because now with the US numbers not at where they need to be, they're still going to mitigate against importation of risk. So until this is a mild disease for everybody and everybody is properly vaccinated, we have to really keep it at bay. So those are another practical consideration. And just to reiterate what Mr. Rogers said, the epidemiologists are saying, look, we have not run out of Greek letters, so we can just keep going on and on and on and on with these variants. So if the global the population doesn't get its act together, we have a tough road ahead of us. But right now, I mean, things are remarkably good still, given the circumstances. And we just have to keep being smart and keep fighting strategically, which we have done so far, right?
Just one thing I'd like to mention, Premier, before I pass back the mic. Contact tracing is critical for us. If we do not do the contact tracing properly and isolate persons who are positive or quarantine persons who we think may be infected until we know better, we do not have a chance of stemming this tide. So when we contact you as a possible contact, we need you to respond. We need to be responsible and say, okay, yes, I was here, I was there. Yes, I'm going to come in for testing. We've had a little challenge this time because some people feel that, I feeling good. I was here, yes, but I ain't got no sniffles, and this so forth and so on. Once we contact you, it means that your name was given to us as a bona fide contact of a positive case. So it is not for you to say you don't have any of this, you don't have any of that. It's possible you are positive, but you are asymptomatic. So when we call, please respond. Please don't hang up your phone when you tell us when we tell you what we're trying to do. Please don't lock off your phone, as some of you have, when you're trying to get you back. Don't worry, we know where you're living and come look for you. The point I'm trying to make is we're all in this together. And the Ministry of Health is not going to contact you if we don't have the reason to contact you. We are not looking for work for ourselves. There's no reason why we want to go all the way western if we don't have to. So we're employing the public. If we contact you, there's a reason why we contact you, and please, assist us in this regard. Thank you very much.
Talking of testing, are there any plans for unvaccinated frontline workers, I'm talking like hospitality, civil servants, teachers, and so on, to have frequent testing? Are there any plans for doing that?
We'll have to revisit that. Certainly, it's always on the cards for that. Right now, the regulations are in place for us to do that for the aviation industry. Certainly, we put some regulations in place about 3 weeks ago that allows pilots to stay overnight if they're vaccinated and so forth. But that comes with, and you have to be vaccinated first of all if you're a pilot to stay overseas overnight. But still, you have to come and do testing once a week. So yes, we looking at that now, and it's always on the cards, but it's not something that we certainly are looking at to implement right away. But it's certainly, as I mentioned before, person, place, and time, agent, host, and environment. It all depends on what's happening in the community. At any point in time, we'll have to look and take assessments and make recommendations to the Ministry, to Executive Council.
Quick questions actually. The AstraZeneca, the next shipment, do we have an estimated arrival time yet?
Yes, that will be the end of August, but that is basically to cover first doses who would have gotten up to the 30th of July. So the numbers so far between that will be vaccinated beginning the 2nd of September is about 200 persons. So we are not going to bring in a load of vaccines that are going to stay here and waste again. Our vaccine may have to ship to a third country. It's basically vaccines to bring in to cover those persons who have been vaccinated at the end of July. Now, the Ministry of Health will be working on a questionnaire that we're going to put on our website soon for minors to see if there's interest for minors to be vaccinated, school-age children. And depending on the results of those, we still have to work out the logistics and the cold chain of those vaccines that are currently approved to be given to minors, would be the Pfizer and so forth. There's a challenge, as we indicated. We have never really in Angola used those vaccines because of cold chain and because of other technicalities. But we think that group is a critical group for us to look at. And we are going to be putting a survey instrument on our website soon to gauge the interests of guardians and parents to see interest in vaccinating school-age children between the ages of 12 and 17. And depending on how that plays out, we will look into the possibility of that if we can get those in here. But yes, so we and basically that's where we are with vaccinations.
So just to clarify, AstraZeneca does not work for young kids, it's not given to young children?
No, it's not tested beyond,
okay.
Under
Okay.
18. They were doing some trials, but I think they suspended them in February, and I don't think they've restarted those trials as yet. I think their trials had gone all the way down to age 6, which would have been good if you could have gotten those trials completed, but they were suspended in February and have not started back as yet. Currently, the age group that can be vaccinated with Pfizer is down to age 12.
And one more quick question. There's some angst throughout the community about the wearing of masks, specifically people working in commercial places. They're asking their patrons to wear masks, and they're getting pushback in some cases. Is there any type of enforcement being looked at to kind of make it more mandatory, the wearing of masks?
Yeah, well, currently the regulations are quite clear. The regulations are clear that once you're indoors and places that cannot social distance, you have to wear masks. I think the question is certainly public policing and enforcement, and that is something we have to look at. Certainly we will speak to Royal Angola Police Force about that and other agencies, but it is the law. It is the law of the land right now. We have to wear masks internally. We're in places we cannot social distance.
You saw in the release, further to that, on a practical note, persons in intergenerational households and with persons, with unvaccinated persons, there's nothing wrong with considering your mask wearing indoors. That was actually seen as a weak area in countries that have had spread. You're doing your mask wearing outside, and when you went into the homes, you dropped your guard. So that there's no reason, nothing against considering that now. Hopefully, eventually, that doesn't have to become a norm. But that's a consideration on the individual level. Things that may make people feel more comfortable going forward as we try to coexist with this virus in your own environment. That's a reasonable consideration, and you know your environment, you know your contexts.
Good afternoon. Most of my questions have been answered, but just piggybacking off a few questions, Brenda asked about whether there are plans for persons who are unvaccinated to get tested. I'm just wondering, for those persons, when that come into play, for the unvaccinated to be tested regularly, will they have to pay on their own, or will government cover this cost? First question. Second question, piggybacking again, as it relates to children getting vaccinated, Mr. Rogers, you mentioned a questionnaire will be put out soon. I'm just wondering, what about adults who might prefer to have the Pfizer? Would that be available to those adults as well?
Well, let me put it this way. We're still looking at the cold chain issues, right? If we're going to go into Pfizer, it's going to be to protect a group that can be protected currently. We have had AstraZeneca here since February. In fact, if you look at evidence worldwide, AstraZeneca is the most used vaccine globally. All over the world, and it's working. For different reasons, people have decided some people have decided not to take it, and some people have decided they prefer to go to different countries and get certain other things. But that's a bridge we'll have to cross when we get to it. But as it is right now, we are looking to cover a group that cannot be covered otherwise. And it's a very vulnerable group. We're talking about persons 12 to 17 years old in classes all day in areas where they cannot social distance properly. Maybe going back home to and being taught by people, some of them who refuse to get vaccinated and these type of things. So we trying to find a way that protects them. And certainly if there's a need to go further, we'll have to discuss at that point in time. But right now, it's for us to try to vaccinate the younger persons.
Yeah, and further to that, realistically, the UK and everywhere, the policy has not been to promote this idea that one vaccine is superior to the other. And there we are competing against their needs as well. So that's just being realistic. When they give out the data and so on, they're using these interchangeably, which is available and which according to recommendations and so on. So being realistic, we would have to prioritize the younger persons and really see how we could get over that cold chain issue as well.
I'll deal with your first part. Yes. Certainly you would think that persons who have the option to vaccinate and who choose not to, that they should have to pay themselves, but for the testing themselves. We have not made that final determination. We are in discussion with employers, and also government is an employer of some of the persons who have been vaccine defiant. And so these are discussions we are having as to determine the best way forward. But make no mistake, those discussions are ongoing because we do, as you've heard from the health team, vaccinations do work. And we've seen the effects of that. And just think about our vulnerable population, our children, when school opened, that we need to make sure that we can give them as much protection as possible. So until we can get Pfizer vaccine here to cover those 12 to 17 years old, then we'll have to make sure that those who are responsible for our children and those in vulnerable positions do the responsible thing.
A couple months ago, there was a great amount of passion among anti-vaxxers, folks who didn't want to be vaccinated for one reason or another. Do you see a change of heart nowadays in that area?
Well, when it comes to vaccinations, there are three types of persons. There are persons who are going to get vaccinated willingly. There are persons who are going to get vaccinated after some discussion because they're a little hesitant, but they need more information. But at the end of the day, they'll make the decision to get vaccinated. And they're going to be a core group of persons who will never get vaccinated no matter what. They will, maybe St. Peter might have to come down and tell them something. But there are core people who will never ever get vaccinated because of some beliefs. And those type of people tend to be the loudest persons in regard. But what I can say with regard to Angola vaccination, when you're in a country like Angola, if almost 10,000 people have the first dose, and almost 9,000 people have the second dose, I think we can say that we think we got a message across, right? And I'll leave it as that.
Doc, in reference to the cluster, how many of those unvaccinated persons were in the cluster?
Everyone thus far, for the last few cases, have been vaccinated persons. We're seeing remarkably asymptomatic to mild symptoms. So thus far, they're all vaccinated persons, fully vaccinated.
And early on, when persons were asking about how herd immunity works, and we're not there yet, but we had explained that when herd immunity, how it works is that when the virus comes in, it's likely to hit someone who's vaccinated as opposed to someone who's not. And that gives some protection. So you'll find in a country where the majority of people are vaccinated, like Iceland. Iceland has close to 85% of the population with both doses. So you'll find those countries have, if the virus does come in, it'll impact persons who are mostly vaccinated because you have the greater population vaccinated. But Iceland has not had a death since the 5th of May. As large as the country is, it has not had a death of COVID since the 5th of May. Prior to that, before the country was fully vaccinated, of course, you had persons dying from COVID. But that in itself indicates that the vaccination is preventing serious illness and death.
61% of the entire population having had a first dose at least, and then 58% of us fully vaccinated, right?
Is there a difference in quarantine time for visitors and locals?
Well, what we have done in principle, put it this way, persons that are going to be resident or entering Anguillan households, think about that way. We want to introduce, we have introduced already 4-day quarantine for fully vaccinated persons that are returning residents. And if the unvaccinated is 10 days, not so yet for the visitors. We have not touched that as yet for the reasons I had described. Season is over. We have identified a very different risk in terms of categorization, and we're testing those persons out. So that's where we're kind of weighing in terms of risk and in terms of the benefits to the economy, to the image of the island, and so on and so forth. So as you know, today we instituted a 4-day quarantine for returning residents.
My last question on this, I represent my Dominicano people, right? They've taken the Chinese vaccine. If they take the Pfizer vaccine, do they still need to have the 2 doses and then time period, or can have the 1 vaccine?
Say it again, sorry, I missed that part.
Most people in the Dominican Republic initially had taken the Chinese vaccine, but now the stipulation for Anguilla is that we don't recognize that.
As yet. I mean, it may just be a matter of time, but we're waiting on the UK research, guidance, and so on. Yeah.
But now some of them are beginning, because they want to come back to Anguilla, they are taking the Pfizer vaccine. Should they take the 2 doses, or can they take 1 dose and come and enter?
Well, in the first instance, there's no protocol that supports that. We go by protocol for everything. And the fact is, if you have taken a first dose of a vaccine that's not recognized, it's not recognized. So if you take a first dose of a vaccine that's not recognized yet, and then you take a second dose of something that is recognized, it's still null and void for our purposes. It's not going to be accepted. So that would be the short answer to that. We just have to wait on guidance and hard evidence and the data and the research. But as of today, we don't have those vaccines recognized by the UK government, and so we have to keep it there. The good news is, of course, if they're returning residents, they can still return, and they'll have to do the quarantine, the 10-day quarantine,
Dr. Webster, Dr. Andrew, I'm not sure if I missed it or maybe if you mentioned it, but last week when you mentioned that the hospitality worker, when he tested positive, is he in the recovered phase, and were you able to detect how he was able to contract the virus?
No, that's still unknown, and he's not considered recovered at this time. We could potentially test him today, but we wait at least 10 days usually, unless that person has to get on a flight, and they can test negative at 7 days. That's possible, but because he's here, we'll test him in another 3 days or so. But he's one of the 13 still considered active at this time. Yes. Sources unknown and clearly highly unlikely. We're not convinced, or there's no indication that he got infected at work. During the period where he would have been exposed, at least 2 of those days he wasn't even at work. you know, so the nature of his job and so on, and he has had no contact with any active cases in his establishment. There were none at the time, so it's not work related.
Is it bizarre? Is it a cause for concern?
I mean, when we put out these, the press, of course, it's a cause for concern. That's what we're saying. We're saying that what we're seeing now, I mean, we need to step back and plug a hole. That's what we're saying. We are seeing a glaring defect, a chink in the armor. And it's more than anecdotal evidence, there's suspicions just based on the nature of the investigation. Similarly with the second one, and with the cluster, we see proof of what we had said was a problem. Because this cluster is linked to a returning resident who was not quarantining and who was not retested until just now because of the cluster. So it's proof that for at least one instance that there's a risk there. So hence the reason for reintroducing the quarantine, and hence the reason we're begging people to understand why we did that. It's just in the best interest of the community, honestly.
If there are no further questions for the health team, then I'll thank them for the continuous and the tireless service in Anguilla since January of 2020. And, you know, we wish them, you know, that they continue to stay strong and that, you know, they continue to do a great job. And I'll allow them to leave so that they can get on to continuing the contact tracing and keeping us updated. Thank you again very much. In the meantime, there was a press release that went out from the Ministry of Finance a little while ago, and I'd like to take this opportunity to read it if you haven't seen it. And this has to do with the statutory body's contract management review. And the statement states, fellow Anguillians, as you will recall, upon entering office in July of 2020, I informed you of the poor financial situation this administration inherited. The economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic also exposed the poor fiscal situation facing some of the statutory bodies, with issues such as lack of transparent reporting of financial activities, overexposure to contingent liability risk associated with contractual commitments, and inadequate liquidity or reserves. Some of the statutory bodies had entered into expensive contracts and obligations that they could not afford. The Ministry of Finance completed a review of the contingent liabilities of these statutory bodies last year, and our initial concerns were confirmed. As you know, we had to make very difficult decisions to approve increases in fees to some of the services provided by some of the statutory bodies to enable them to survive during this difficult period and be viable long term. The magnitude of the problems that were inherited by my administration was and is cause for concern. After the review was completed, this administration took immediate corrective action to improve accountability and oversight of the statutory bodies. Measures such as producing and publishing quarterly reports and ensuring that budgets are presented and approved by the Executive Council have already been implemented. Additionally, legislation was drafted to amend the Public Procurement and Contract Administration Act to govern the manner in which statutory bodies procure goods and services. Also, in an effort to address the serious issues uncovered, my administration requested that the United Kingdom government provide the necessary funding to enable an independent audit of the contracting and governance arrangements of these statutory bodies. The UK government agreed to our request. In September of 2020, the government's appointed chief auditor, the Welsh Audit Office, was asked to conduct a review of the procurement and contract management process within the statutory bodies to ascertain if expected governance processes, checks, and balances had been adopted by the boards when conducting business. The Welsh Audit Office prepared the scope and agreed to conduct this work in accordance with the Financial Administration and Audit Act. However, the work was deferred multiple times due to COVID-19 movement restrictions in Wales. In May of 2021, the Welsh Audit Office indicated that due to continued uncertainties regarding travel and movement, that they could not conduct the work themselves. After completion of a tender process, the United Kingdom-based Axiom International Limited has been contracted to complete this review, which is about to commence. Just want you to know that Axiom International Limited is a company tasked with building capacity, institutional and public sector reform. The review will include a selection of contracts across statutory bodies to examine if they have followed effective procurement practices, governance and approval processes, if due consideration had been given to value for money, to assess the overall level of fiduciary risk, including the risk of corruption, and whether companies selected were appropriately qualified and experienced to deliver the services. We look forward to the completion of the exercise, which will help inform additional actions we can take to further strengthen the viability of these statutory bodies. This administration will continue to live up to our promise that we'll put the necessary checks and balances in place to make boards accountable and to stop historic poor practices that have resulted in the fiscal misfortune and social degradation of our beloved country. This administration will continue to demonstrate transparency, accountability, and good governance. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless Anguilla. Thank you. While you ponder on that presentation, I will ask the Minister for Infrastructure and Tourism to give us an update in that ministry, and then we can ask questions after.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick update on the happenings in the ministry as it relates to ANGUILLA. We have secured the services of Castalia, who's doing the assessment on both water and ANGUILLA, with the goal to strengthen both institutions and place them in a position where we can move ahead on the promise of reliable water and electricity. Also on the issue of ANGUILLA, the annual general meeting will be held on Wednesday, 18th of August. It'll be mostly virtual, but there will be some in-house aspects to the annual general meeting. It's the 16th annual general meeting of the utility company. We also have been having discussions with a number of institutions on renewable and reusable energy. This is very important to our national development, and we have this goal of transforming our energy sector. And as you know, this is decades overdue, but we are excited that the dream is becoming much clearer. And the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary has been doing a tremendous amount of work where this is concerned. As you can see from the Cartaway Boulevard, trenching has commenced. It's hoped to be finished in September. That is construction one, the tender, and this is all part of the work to rehabilitate the Cartaway Boulevard, what we commonly call the Valley Main Road. And the team at the ministry is working very hard with the Governor's office to deliver on this project. As you know, we have come too far and received too much criticism to turn back now. The goal, as we stated very early this administration, is also to extend the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airstrip. To that end, the business case and the aviation master plan will form part of the preliminary work to reach that goal. A proper analysis and due diligence must be completed to ensure that there's value for money, transparency, and a project that delivers. We continue to discuss aviation with a number of carriers, some of which I cannot speak about now due to confidentiality issues, but as soon as they are confirmed, we will let you know. We also are finalizing the regulations for child seats, seat belts, personalized vanity number plates, driving under influence, and once that's done, we will go to the public with a series of public consultations with a view of having these regulations enacted. We are also extending procurement to all the statutory bodies within the ministry. This is to ensure the process of tendering for projects is transparent and void of any corruption. We believe that this is long overdue and very happy to see this moving forward. Again, we'll be coming to the public shortly with public consultation to discuss with you the rationale for this. The mobilization of the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal commences today. And with a temporary road work in the area will be starting tomorrow. As you can appreciate, we are very happy to see this project get underway, because this was the ANGUILLA program project that almost got away. And we must thank the governor's office for having faith in us and the ministry to deliver. It must be noted that this project could not be secured without the diligence and hard work of Claudius Gomes and Joban Gomes and Darrell Richardson, Kasim Ford, Carlisle Lake, and the rest of the team. I must also thank the Honourable Premier for his input in the design of this facility to ensure that it caters to the unprecedented times that we find ourselves, and in the architect, Raoul Vanterpool, who went above and beyond. And this is the first ANGUILLA program project that is done solely by us. Just to note, the signage for the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal will be erected this week and will highlight our funding partner, the FCDO, the contractor, Leroy Gomes of Leroy Construction, the aforementioned architect, the engineers, which comes from the Ministry of Maiku and Tourism, and the client, who is all of us, the government of Anguilla. I must also caution those utilizing the George Hill bypass to use with due care and attention, and must also thank the Outreach Baptist Church and Pastor Cecil Richardson and his congregants for the great job they are doing to beautify the area. In a previous press conference, I mentioned 4 roads that we are hoping to pave this year. All the technical work has been completed, and we are in the process of securing funding for the same. Once that is done, we will immediately start on those roads. So that is a brief roundup of what is happening in the Ministry of Infrastructure and Tourism. The tourism aspect, the capable Parliamentary Secretary will expound on that some more. I think there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in tourism that we can report on.
Good afternoon. Lots of things happening, not much to report as yet, but just to give you an idea of where we're at as it relates to arrivals, how tourism has been, and other matters. So many persons have been questioning about the bounce back of tourism, if we expect immediate bounce back, if we can have things to look forward to. Just to give you an idea, between July 1st and July 31st, we have received 6,704 arrivals. To make that 984 of which were residents and 5,720 were visitors. Now to compare that to 2018 saw 5,251 arrivals in the same period. So we see that we're just about on par and exceeding. 2019 did exceed that amount, but I'm comparing it to a year after as it was our recovery year, so we can look to see where we're at. And as that relates to economics, one of the major hotels in Anguilla would have reported that this has been the highest occupancy in the history of the property, and the first time in the history of the property that service charge exceeded $1,000 US in July. So things have been looking good tourism-wise, and we realize that it's not just translating into number, but economic activity, and more persons benefiting from arrivals. To give you an idea of how many persons would have received this amount, the hotel would have also reported that they had about 400 persons employed for the month of July. So that's a really good number, and it shows that ANGUILLA is still top of mind. It shows that the work that we have been doing throughout the shutdown would have materialized into something that we are reaping the benefits of in very short order, because that would have been our first month in reopening. Many persons have questions about the portal team and the life of the portal and whether or not if it would expire on September 30th as previously announced. At this point, we cannot definitively say how long the portal will last, and that depends on a lot of factors. But since it is my job to ensure that the portal is running smoothly, we are taking this slower period to do a lot of improvements not only to the portal itself by switching it to a cloud-based capacity. We're also doing a lot of training for our portal response team and our CMO team so that we have the capacity on hand if we have to have the portal going beyond October 1st, that we will be able to process persons much quicker, and we'd also be able to respond to the demand. Based on our conversations with American Airlines and other major hotels, we realized that the bookings for October to December is very good. And it means that, all things going well, we'll have a very good reopening of the season, and subsequently, that's a good thing for all Anguillians. To accommodate American Airlines, we've been doing a lot of work at the Clayton J. Airport. The minister has tasked me with the responsibility of ensuring that the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport is prepared and ready for American Airlines. So you will see improvements occurring there in short order. And today I had a walkthrough. There are many days now, but today I had a walkthrough with some of our tourism stakeholders who will be assisting us with the improvements needed to facilitate American Airlines and other airlines to come. With American Airlines coming into Anguilla, we have a lot of open points of access. It opens up more access points throughout the U.S. You know that previously we relied predominantly on the tri-state area. And so now with this Miami route, it opens up a lot of access throughout the US, UK, Dubai, and Canada. And we are shifting our marketing to follow through with that, and to ensure that Anguilla can take advantage, and advantage is not the word I'm looking for, but benefit from the increased opportunities with American Airlines coming to Anguilla. It is something that we are looking forward to. We are very excited. This is the first time in Anguilla's history that we've had a direct commercial flight directly to the U.S. mainland. So we are doing our best to ensure that Anguilla is prepared and that we also benefit from that route to Anguilla. So there's a lot of things going on. The minister wanted me to explain the Dubai connection. There are straight flights to Dubai and from Dubai to Miami, and then you can then take American Airlines from Miami to Anguilla. As it relates to the price, that flight will commence on December 11th and be running on Wednesdays and Saturdays. It is comparative to flying into St. Martin, and it's at many points lower. So you would find prices ranging between $420 to $580. It depends definitely on the time and the demand. And as we know, ticket fares go up and down depending on the demand. But it is still very competitive. And based on our conversations with them, bookings are very strong, and we are very excited to accommodate them. That's it for me for now. And as more information becomes available, I'll definitely be sharing.
I have a question about the airport, and not specifically about the physical, but the processing of passengers, the speed, the timeliness of the processing. You know, having gone through, like all of us, through our neighbor St. Martin, when we get there in line, I mean, it's maybe a minute to 2 minutes. They scan our passport and we're done. Here, not so fast. So is that being looked at here?
I've always told the ASPA team that I think of the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport as a big airport. As even as how we defined ourselves now, we're moving from regarding ourselves as a small island state to a big ocean territory. So we have to think big, and as a result, we are making the changes to be more competitive on an international standard. I've recently asked for an experience audit where we will time the last passenger leaving the airline and the last passenger leaving the airport, and we would see how long that takes for the movement to go through, and we will see where the holdups are, we will work out the kinks. So that's what's happening right now, and I believe it is to happen on Wednesday of this week. So as we get as I receive the results of that report, we would work with the ASPA team, the ministry, customs, immigration and such, to see where the holdups are so we can give a better experience.
Just a quick question. When you said direct flights from Miami to Anguilla, is it straight Miami to Anguilla, or you stop in Puerto Rico and then you come to Anguilla?
Straight from Miami to Anguilla.
Okay.
So we call it non-stop excitement.
I had asked this question before sometime, and I'd like to ask it again for clarity and for emphasis. Caribbean Airlines. Caribbean Airlines was due to come to Anguilla during the course of August. Can you please give us a status as to what's happening? I mean, disclose to us what's really happening with Caribbean Airlines.
Caribbean Airlines, we're still in conversation with them, so it's not as if it's something that's not happening. We do have some logistics to work out on our end to ensure that for all commercial activities, we're able to better and best facilitate them. We are working on that in the best way that we can. And they are still in communication, and they are actually waiting on us to see what's possible. So maybe before the end of the year, we will be back again and talking about the actual arrival date, but that's still something that's in play. And as we're making the arrangements for American Airlines, we're also thinking big, not just American Airlines and other airlines, and we're also making arrangements to facilitate them as well.
We know a few months ago, with the opening of Aurora, the owner made an announcement that he'll be assisting with airlift from Florida to Anguilla. Is that still happening? Is that in the making?
Yes, that is still. I think he's bought 2 or 4 airplanes, and they're working on that right now. So that's certainly still in the works.
Also add Caribbean Airlines, it opens up a lot of gateways for us throughout the Caribbean, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, and also through Gatwick and Heathrow, direct flights into Barbados and from Barbados into Anguilla, and also from JFK into Barbados and from Barbados into Anguilla. And even as we speak to that, there's also Cape Air, which is supposed to commence their flights in December, and they also have interline agreements with JetBlue and American Airlines, and they'll be doing twice weekly out of St. Thomas. So it'll be San Juan, St. Thomas, Anguilla, and back twice weekly. So we're excited about the prospects going forward. We can speak to those because those announcements have already been made, but those that we are still having discussions on, we can't speak to at this time, but rest assured, it'll be a blue time in Anguilla.
Well, we are the blue team, so, and Paul Seck is the driver of the Bang Task Force, which is the Blue Economy Task Force. So, any questions? Yes, you should talk about it.
So we recently approved the position paper of the Bang Task Force. Bang stands for Blue Anguilla. It is a position paper that gives us a comprehensive analysis of Anguilla's ability and readiness to take to deep dive, if I use that term, into the blue economy as a way of economic diversification. We are already doing some aspects of the blue economy, as where we have fishing that already occurs. We also have coastal tourism, which also plays a part of the blue economy. But this Bank Task Force position paper gives us an idea of where we are, the strengths, the weakness, the opportunities, and the threats, and gives governments a template and a timeline on how to move into these economies, such as longline fishing, scuba diving, and it's not coming to me right now. I wish I had the paper in front of me, but it's a lot of opportunities that we can expand on in the blue economy. And how do we get there? The legislative changes that we'll have to make, and it also speaks about waste management and renewable energy. So how do we do that in a sustainable way, and it's in line with the UN Sustainable Goals? We also be using that to bid for grants internationally, and we have been successful on 2 of the initiatives thus far, and we intend on following up all at COP and the Darwin International Plus Fund next year. So one of the things that we've benefited from would have been to do a study of Corridor and how it exists right now, a feasibility study and how we move forward. We know that has been a big concern for the members of that community. So it will give us that information to then push forward in how we handle Corridor in the future. Renewable energies has also been high on the agenda, and how do we benefit from that and align ANGUILLA with grants and funds to pursue those initiatives.
Is all of this being done through our government, or have we got outside help for this blue economy development?
So the position paper was completed by the Bank Task Force, which consists of persons within government, chaired by Chanel Petit-Barrett, and the funds that we are looking for are grants. So there are some UK grants and other international grants that we have been looking at, and we are preparing ourselves to pursue, and we have been successful in our pursuit of some.
In your presentation just now, you mentioned the COP26, and we know UK will be hosting the meeting this year. I'm just wondering, I know the BOT is supposed to make a presentation as well. So tell us about ANGUILLA's participation, and will you be presenting the Bang Theory initiative at the meeting?
So the Bang is the core of our presentation, and we will use the information from the Bang report to fashion our bids at COP26. There are about 5 themes in COP26 this year, and we are looking at 4, and we believe that we'll be successful. Unfortunately, although it's being held in the UK, each UK overseas territory will not be presenting individually. We will still be represented as a cohort and present all our ideas collectively. But I don't think that limits our chances of being successful at the Bang at COP26. I just think it gives us an opportunity to put our heads together, and also gives us an opportunity to present our position as a region.
The media wants to know, is the position paper available?
I can make it available to you, and you can take excerpts, but it's not widely available, as it is still an internal strategic document that we have for our position.
Mr. Hughes, you mentioned ANGLIC's AGM coming up pretty soon. Are there any plans? We know that there's an acting CEO. Are there any plans to have that vacancy put out, or to have that position filled, or probably the acting CEO's substantive position? Are there any plans to have a permanent person in that position?
That isn't a position for the AGM, to be honest.
I know, but I was just asking you about any plans to have them.
The board of directors will have to determine that. Most likely, if it is, they may have to advertise that role, and we will not have any interference as a government. We will not have any interference in the selection of who they would choose. So that is always a hope that there will be an open and transparent ad that will go out for persons to advertise, whether internally or externally or both. But we will not involve ourselves in that process.
If there are no other questions for the Ministry of Infrastructure and Tourism, the Paul Secretary, I want to thank them for the great job they're doing, and also the Bang Task Force. I know Ms. Felicia said Bang Theory, but she's thinking of the Big Bang Theory. But this Bang Task Force will have a big impact with the blue economy. So thank you for preempting that, Ms. Felicia. I'll turn over to the Minister for Social Development and Education to bring us up to date. And thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I have a short update for you today because the update in relation to the Ministry of Education, the protocols for reopening of the schools will take place on this Friday at 2 p.m. so that we'll have a special press conference on education this Friday at 2 so that you can be fully aware as to what will be the protocols with education and the operation of the new plans coming into the 2021-2022 school year. For today, though, I will be updating you on 3 developments in the Ministry of Education and Social Development. The first would be the National Sports Act and the National Sports Council. Since last year, September, the Executive Council approved the formation of the National Sporting Act Working Group, which comprised of Mr. Ken Banks, Mr. Andre Collins, Mrs. Nikishma Rogers-Hull, Ms. Lorna Rogers, Mr. Gordon Connor, Ms. Katrina Richardson, the ministerial assistant, and myself. The role and the work of the working group is to develop the legislative framework for the sustainable development of sport in Anguilla, and the focus to create a support system for our athletes and our local talent on one side, and on the other side to create some support for our national sporting associations so that they can become more efficient. We are in the final stages, and the legislation will also include aspects such as our child safeguarding and protection to allow children or adults who interface with children to be adequately screened before they are actually dealing with our youth. The working group is also working on the National Sports Council, and that will be responsible for supporting our national associations with providing structure and programs for our youth, especially when they're moving from the grassroots level to the elite level, to be able to help them as they break through both regionally and internationally. And the legislation, of course, is an opportunity for us to bring about some 21st century change to our sporting legislation and to attract a higher level of international support and opportunity because we have a properly regularized framework around sport. The second thing that we are working on in the Ministry of Social Development and Education at the moment is the National Diversion Strategy. As you know, on the 1st of July, the Child Justice Act was passed into law, and the National Diversion Strategy functions as a supporting document to provide guidance to social workers, probation officers, judicial officers, and persons who are in contact with young people. It provides a structure for the National Diversion Policy, which its central theme is to try to reduce the amount of children who are exposed to the formal criminal justice system. Of course, it is not available for every child, and there are specific circumstances through which the diversion policy will be triggered. It doesn't, of course, mean that all children may never get their liberty taken from them if they commit an offense, but it is put in place to ensure that we hold children accountable for their actions by redirecting them to rehabilitative programs. And finally, we are on the last phase of the rollout of the National Parenting Program. So the National Parenting Program is a brainchild of the PAVE organization in conjunction with the Ministry of Social Development. And this program is geared towards creating tools for parents who are dealing with challenges It's about ensuring, as we know, parents are central to creating a healthy school and society system. So we are looking at how we can provide support and to empower parents to build healthy relationships, to deal with conflict resolution, time management, and financial management. A number of institutions and resources have said and have clearly cried out for the need for national parenting program, including parents themselves, who have stated that they want to see more support for them going forward. So we are looking at instituting this program to create almost early interventions so that we can ensure that parents have the support they need going forward, and they know where to access resources going forward for support. And we're looking to roll this out at the end of September, beginning of October. So those are the 3 updates from the Ministry of Social Development and Education at the moment in terms of our policy and legislative agendas that will be coming to the fore within the next 2 to 3 months.
Minister, can you please give us a report on update as to the status of the school buildings?
As I stated a little earlier, all the school development, school programs and updates, I will be able to inform you exclusively on Friday at 2 p.m. So if you can, all persons who are tuning into the live, to tune in on Friday and have their questions prepared in relation to the schools, the development, the reopening, the protocols, etc. on Friday.
All right. You have.
Dr. Webster, I'm just wondering, you made mention of the statutory boards and an audit will be conducted. You said pretty soon, so I'm just wondering, you have a specific date, and how long do you anticipate the audit to take? And how many persons will be coming down? How many persons will be conducting the audit?
Good questions. The review will start mid-August. I know they were supposed to be coming in today, 2 persons in the first instance. There may be more coming. They got delayed, so hopefully be here tomorrow. But as soon as we have already started the process, but reports were sent, and when they come, they will be doing getting specific documents, looking at minutes, and also talking to the different stat bodies, looking at board meetings and stuff like that. In terms of how long it will take, in the first instance, we're looking at about 6 weeks.
Premier Minister of Health, the big building for the polyclinic in the valley. Can you give us an update on that as well as let us know exactly what's happening there?
Well, I attended the ANGUILLA programs update meeting last week on Thursday, and the Valley Health Complex, as you stated, it was scheduled to be completed in May, and there has been some delay with procurement of equipment and things like that, and construction equipment. They are getting there. Right now, we're looking at a projected time of October, but we're hoping that we can speed it up as best as possible. But thank you for that question. If there are no questions for the Minister of Social Development and Education, please, know that she will be doing a presentation on education and all the questions you have on Friday this week at 2 p.m. So tune in and certainly be ready, because, as it is, we're very concerned about making sure that the schools are opening and the students are getting back to school. So thank you, Minister. You can be excused. And we go to the Minister of Home Affairs, and maybe he can update us on what we call the Remington Lake Law, which is you know, reuniting families who have persons here on work permits, you know. They call it the bummy law, of course, you know.
Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon to our listeners and our viewers. You will recall back in April, the eruption of the La Sofia volcano on the 9th of April. And on April 14th and 15th, EXCO would have met to consider what measures Anguilla would offer to the government and people of St. Vincent. And on April 17th, the government would have met with a cross-section of the Vincentian community in Anguilla, back of the police headquarters, and you know there were some relief efforts ongoing. And then we had our lockdown on the 22nd of April. So this may have been reported, and if it hasn't, I would like to report it here now, that one of the relief measures that Anguilla would have decided at EXCO was financial assistance in the sum of $150,000 to the government of St. Vincent. I can confirm here today that payment was made on the 23rd of June via wire transfer through the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA. So Anguilla did fulfill its obligation of making that contribution to the government and people of St. Vincent. And we continue to welcome children here. There have been a number of persons that would have applied to bring in their children here, and those are still ongoing. So just wanted to update you on that. The other substantive issue that I wanted to talk to you about is constitutional reform. There's been a lot going on over the past year since we have gotten into office. But constitutional reform, while you may not have heard much about it, there were a lot of things happening behind the scenes. We are now in a position to make the following announcements. So in the month of September, we are going out into each of the 7 electoral districts on Monday in District 1, on the 2nd of September in District 1, the 6th of September in District 2, the 9th of September in District 3, the 13th of September in District 4, the 16th of September in District 5, the 20th of September in District 6, and the 27th of September in District 7. We're going to be doing some town halls in each of these 7 districts. We want persons to come out. We want to reawaken the person's interest in this constitutional reform exercise. And we feel that is the best way to get persons back again interested. We are not comparing the districts. We are giving each district its full time. And we're looking at a time of between 6 to 8 p.m. on those evenings. We are looking at church halls, most of the meetings, and maybe 1 or 2 schools. So we'll give you more information as time goes on. But we wanted to announce now that we're going to be having these town hall meetings where persons can come out and hear, share their comments, what they would like to see happening in the constitutional reform exercise. We strongly encourage persons to take full advantage of this opportunity. Persons tend not to come out to these sessions, they tend to stay at home, and then they complain that they weren't involved. So we give you an ample opportunity. Each district will have its moment in time, so to speak, and we certainly hope that you will take advantage. We'll be issuing more information as the weeks go on in terms of the venue and so forth. But that's to give you an early indication to put those dates into your diaries. Then we are setting up a small drafting committee that is going to put the current edition of the Constitution together. You know, this has been an ongoing process. There have been certain recommendations, certain things that have been decided, and so we're going to create a new draft for discussion purposes, and we're going to be enlisting the help of the chambers with that. So we're hoping to get that somewhat completed, hopefully, by the ending of August or sometime in September. So that's what we're going to be working on assiduously. And then the other important aspect I wanted to bring to your attention is the whole issue of boundaries delimitation. As you know, there have been some talk about our boundaries, some of the fact that the districts are not equally distributed. And so there's been quite a lot of discussion on this. And there are a number of options that we're going to be putting forward during our town halls and our subsequent discussions. So there are about 5 options on the table. I want to put them out to you here this afternoon, the listening public. The first one is we do nothing. We continue as is, as we have done over the years. We keep the 7 districts just as they are, and we continue business as usual. The second option is that we split districts 3 and 4 into 2 smaller districts, so that essentially gives us 9 districts. That's an option. And that would be just splitting 3 and 4. The third option is to redistribute the 7 districts into 9. So we would utilize the software that we have available and create basically 9 new districts, which would basically go from 7 to 9, but differently to just splitting 3 and 4. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. That's an option. Then there's another option to redivide or redistribute the existing 7 districts. And we were able to get the help of a very capable civil servant, and I want to call his name here because when we have civil servants doing really excellent work, I think sometimes you need to recognize their efforts. Mr. Julian Hughes, he works on that planning. They have some very sophisticated software down there. And he was able to overlay, using the road networks, 7 new districts along the existing 7. And in September, when we come out, we'll be showing you that as well. Very, very exciting, using the road networks and basically distributing into more equitable sizes using buildings. And then the very last option that is on the table is to turn Anguilla into one large island-wide district. So those were the 5 options that are on the table that we're going to be certainly getting feedback from you, the members of the public, as we move along. And then before I close, I just want to go back to the Premier's reference to the Bommy law. And quite honestly, this has been an ongoing discussion. As you know, I've been saying all along my desire to see this population grow. And I will tell you, it's a very active discussion at the ministry. And we're hoping to actually get a paper to council very soon where we can look at that, lessening. What that will really entail is a couple of things. One, lessening the time period that it's going to take for persons to be able to get status here. Right now, it takes about 10 years to get permanent residence. We are looking at reducing that time. We are looking at creating incentives for persons who want to purchase land and build houses to get this in a lesser time. And so that is a very active discussion, and I'm raising it here because I want people to understand that it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It's an examination of current policies. It's going to require decisions at Executive Council. It's going to require perhaps changes to existing legislation. But it's something that this minister is keeping very active on his plate, because I would like to see a few more people living in Anguilla than we currently have. It's going to have its benefits to our tax base. It's going to mean more users for our health services in those nice big buildings we have. It's going to mean more children in our school system. It's going to have lots of benefits, more apartments rented, more money sucked in the economy. So there's going to be lots of benefits. So, Premier, that's my take on the Bommy law.
Thank you very much. And also you wanted to say that right now persons here on work permits, their families can, they can apply for their families, right?
Yes, we are also adding to the work permit structure as well, the ability now to include members of their family and their work permits as well. Thank you, Premier. Yes.
If we're going to be shortening the time for application for people to be eligible for work permits, we also have to be mindful too of these understudy. When we have people brought in to work in, say for example, the tourism industry, we need to be strong in making sure that the understudy program is in full swing in order to protect our locals.
Very good question. I know I would have reported in an early edition about our understudy policy that we were created, that there has been a first draft. We would have sent that off to the International Labour Organization. And as a matter of fact, within the past few days, they would have come back to us with quite a number of comments which are going to inform the further development of that policy. So we were very happy that the ILO was able to respond to us, some very useful comments that they would have sent, and it's going to make that policy very much improved and stronger. And we're going to incorporate those, and hopefully we should have it down to EXCO in the next 2 weeks or so. Yes, thank you.
You mentioned your intent to reduce the number of years from 10 years down to what number? And that's question one, but question two related to that. You also mentioned that that's for those who will build houses and buy land. Is that a criteria for getting the reduction?
Yes, we want to see some investment in this country. Quite a number of persons have expressed interest in purchasing land and building houses. As a matter of fact, quite a few of them are going a rather unorthodox route. They are getting friends or persons who have status to do it, which is highly dangerous, because then different people have title to that land, and that could be dangerous for them. So we are looking at that. I think it's a bit premature at this point to say exact times, but it's something that we are looking at because we want to create incentives to encourage persons to come here, invest in Anguilla, buy land and build houses. So I can't say for now what a definite time period will be, but we are looking at shortening what is there currently with a view of creating incentives for persons to settle here in Anguilla.
So I'm quickly looking at the 5 options that you gave, and looking at streets. I'm assuming you mean more, not assuming, but more the population, right? So you would redraw the boundaries based on more equitable populations. Okay, and the last one, turning it into one large district.
Yes, everybody runs at large.
Okay, that was how do you handle that politically at large? I mean, really, has that been discussed?
Well, this is what I'm saying. Right now, they are just options. We are just throwing them out as options for discussion. We cannot say what the final decision will be. But I think it's important that people begin to think about these various options and what they would mean. For example, if it becomes one giant electoral district, and what would that mean for the different districts? Would people lose their sense of district culture-ness and those? So there are a whole lot of things, but I'm saying we're coming of age in terms of our constitutional development, and these are the issues that we have to begin to look at realistically in terms of advancement of our constitutional reform and so forth. Yeah.
Mr. Hodge, in talking about your initiative, somehow your comments draw me back home in terms of what's happening. In a few months, we're going to have a number of students already leaving schools. Some may make the decision to go to sixth form, others may venture out, others will be looking for a place of employment. And we know in this COVID environment, things are already challenged, things are tough. And on top of that, persons may not be too keen on hiring students who are now adults entering the workforce because they may not have been vaccinated. But I'm just wondering, what is the Ministry of Labor doing to help the private sector perhaps employ some of those students, the new school leavers, and are you probably in discussion or looking at even creating incentives for employers probably to hire these new students?
That's a really good question, and it really ties back to the economy and how we can grow and develop this economy. Because as we speak to employers, particularly in hospitality industry, you will know that they have been hiring quite a number of Anguillians, particularly since things have picked up in the hospitality sector. So this is something that has to be tied to development of a stronger economy, and I know our Minister, Kyle, has been working with initiatives in fishing, in the manufacturing, and agricultural sectors. These have to go hand in hand with creating a wider network, a wider infrastructure for persons to be employed in. Okay, so it's something that is a combined effort between labor, in fact, all the ministries of government, tourism, infrastructure, all of them, all goes hand in hand to really creating a wider diversification of the economy. You heard the parliamentary secretary talk about the blue economy. So it's all part of a whole initiative to really broaden the economic base for Anguilla and create more opportunities for Anguillians as well as persons coming to settle in Anguilla to find work. And we are confident that this will be possible, yes.
Thank you. And Banks, that stands for Blue Anguilla, if anybody is asking, related to the blue economy. Well, Minister Kyle Hodge, Minister for Economic Development, Commerce, Information Technology, Natural Resources, and we ask him to give an update.
Thank you, Premier. I have just about 3 updates. First of all, I would like to update on the People's Market. With the development of the Valley Main Road, the Carterway Boulevard, we would have seen that the tree was uprooted, and it displaced 2 vendors that was selling under that tree. Those vendors are now under the People's Market that is dilapidated at the moment. So, we are, continuously working with the different departments to see how quickly we can realize the reconstruction of the People's Market. The quicker and cheaper way to do it right now is to put back some galvanized on the roof. So that is the plan. We will put the roof back on and galvanize, and then on the inside of the market, the first row would be for those selling produce. The second row would be for those selling seafood. We have plans to utilize the front of the yard for different stalls and other vendors that may come from time to time, just the same way how we did the open market day, where we had the front yard filled with vendors. So we plan to also fix the bathrooms and also include running water in the People's Market. At the back, that will be for parking for those vendors that will be selling at the market. With the construction of the Valley Main Road, we would lose about 20 feet to the east of the market as the road shifts a little bit more to the west. So that area and that eastern side will be a lot smaller than it currently is. What we are trying to do also is to pave the area in the front, to make it more suitable for those who will come to vend different crafts or whatever they plan to vend. We have to thank the St. Lucian community. They continue to be on board and they continue to be engaged with us. They have offered us free labor, and the material is already at Maiku. So this is something that should happen while while the Valley Main Road is being developed. I don't have a specific date as to when it will start, but as much as I can update you and the general public, I will be giving those updates. But have no fear, the People's Market will be developed. The next update is on the Business License Act. We should be going to the House for the first reading, either by the end of August, the first week in September. We've done extensive consultation on this document even prior to the first reading, even prior to approving it in the Executive Council, because we wanted the input of the business community, we wanted the input of the chamber, we wanted the input of the people of Anguilla. So we have done a lot. I lost track as to how many public consultations we had on this act. So the first reading will take place, and we may be able to come back to the public again for a final public consultation on that document. But we should have it in place before mid-September. That's when the moratorium comes to an end. And the other update is on the AI domain. Now, this domain is a national asset with great potential. This domain makes money for us. It brings money into the treasury while we are all asleep. So, it went out to tender. And the last update that I have from procurement, they did get a lot of bids, and they have shortlisted those bids to about 3 to 4 companies. These companies are all international companies. We did get bids from a couple local companies, but so far what the procurement team have seen from the international companies is more aligned with the requirements that were set out. To date, we have about 107,000 registered domain users. On January 5th, 2021, that number was 107,480. So over the past 7 months, registered users grew to about 433 users, which is about 61 users per month. And we feel that if given the opportunity, given the chance to be marketed on an international level, that number should really shoot up a lot more than it currently is doing. For example, I went on the website this morning. I forgot the name of the website. I can give it to you in the end. But .jp has 1.5 million registered users. .be has 1.6 million users. .it, which is synonymous for information technology, they have 3.1 million users. .uk, 10 million users. .com, 156 million users. While .ai, which is synonymous with artificial intelligence, there's only 107,000 users. So we definitely see that there's huge potential for the .ai to bring in significant revenues to the government of Anguilla if it is handled and marketed and managed the right way. So there's a lot of work to do. There's no set date for the final bid to be chosen. Like I mentioned earlier, as I get more information, I'll continue to update the general public on where we are as it relates to the .ai domain. But it's looking good so far. Thank you.
So a quick question about the bids. Is it just going to a sole bid, or will it be, you said, I think you have 3, so
Yeah.
will you choose one of the 3, or
Yes.
just one of the 3?
Choose one of the
Just
3.
one of the 3. And in terms of the monies that's received, is it a one-time cash award, or is this something that, how do you make money off of this? I guess I'm trying to ask.
I'm not as technical to explain it, but I know that it's a payment that goes into the government's bank account on a monthly basis. To go into the details of how the profit sharing takes place, I don't have that information right now with me. But based on the bids that were sent, I'll be able to update once a final bidder is chosen. Yeah.
You have a question, Felicia? You look like you're chomping at the bit.
No, I was just, Mr. Hodge in his presentation, just a quick question as it relates to the business license. We know the business moratorium was extended for a few more weeks. I'm just wondering in terms of the business license, I know there was a consultation or consultations, but I know one publicly, there was a gentleman who had an issue with the word governor and council. So I was just curious if that was changed, because I know he made an argument for having minister in council, but we know the governor chairs executive council. Was that a big issue? Has it been changed or has it remained the same?
It was changed. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, I know this one was a marathon, but we wanted everyone to ask questions and to share concerns from the public. Certainly, we had a full complement of cabinet here today, and I'm sure that you've been well informed. I want to thank the ministers, the ministerial assistants for being here. We have the ministerial assistant for sports, culture, and youth hiding in the back. I don't know if he wanted to give any update. You good? All right. Well, again, as I said, I want to thank everyone for coming out. I want to thank Radio Anguilla, the Anguillian, the Daily Herald, KCN, Channel 4. I want to thank Lloyd for being here. Thank my ministerial assistant, Courtney Morton, for always being here, for being very supportive. Our liaison to the Spanish-speaking community was here, and also want to thank Dietz, of course, for making this all possible. And again, the Minister for Social Development Education, she has a presentation on Friday to talk about everything education, including the schools, which ones will be opening, and what the protocols will be. So Friday at 2 p.m., please listen in, participate, and just want to say thanks again, and look forward to seeing you again next Monday at 2 p.m., and certainly before that if it's necessary. Remember to stay safe and follow the health protocols, and we'll update you as things go along in terms of COVID. And again, may God bless you, and may God continue to bless Anguilla. Thank you.